Okay, I think it's probably best to start, and we can bear with a few people joining us shortly. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining the second of our short lunchtime sessions covering innovation and entrepreneurship in NHS Scotland. If you missed the first one, you'll find a recording talking about the innovation landscape more generally and what we do on our website. And I'd like to sort of remind you that if we're going to be recording this session to make it available for others who aren't able to make it today. I'm Fiona Schaefer, the Innovation Manager based in Edinburgh, covering South East Scotland at InnoScot Health, and I'm joined by my colleague Marianne Murphy, one of our project management team. And we've also got two special guests today, Terry O'Neill, Head of Health, KTN, and talking about KTN and Innovate UK funding, Ian Murray from Scottish Enterprise, talking about the support for High Growth Spinouts. And Marianne, Jane, and other colleagues are monitoring the chat box today, so do put in your questions. I can't see the chat really when I'm presenting, so I'll pick that up shortly. And so don't feel you really need to save it to the end. But we'll try and make sure there's plenty of time for that going forward. So a little bit about us for those of you who are new to InnoScot Health. You maybe just not be familiar with our name, as we were originally called Scottish Health Innovations. First started continuing the journey they first started back in 2002 to identify, protect and commercialise intellectual property coming from the NHS. And our role has increased in the last 20 years, but a core remit very much stays the same. So InnoScot Health continues to encourage the culture of innovation, to accelerate the development of healthcare innovations and commercialise those innovations. We're funded by Chief Scientist's Office and are operating a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee. Our organisation has a unique role in unlocking the know-how of NHS staff to improve treatment and patient care, and the importance of healthcare innovation has certainly never been greater. And in a recent survey of NHS staff, the results were really positive. 90% of healthcare staff believe that innovation is important to improve NHS Scotland services. And, you know, there's a really supportive and innovative community that, 64% seeing themselves as innovators, and over 3/4 having ideas. And they are those, key factors that can improve the environment would be how they can improve. New ideas are identified and developed, and getting through to implementation. Part of that is funding, support and guidance, and that's going to be our focus for today. So we assess initial ideas as they come to us as part of an innovation pathway, and of around 100 ideas that we receive each year from the NHS. Following assessment, about 10% of those proceed into our pipeline process where there's a commercial potential. So, and that has a number of different stages. From that assessment, we look at protection, and so we might protect intellectual property, by patenting, or through design, trademark registrations, and also having the appropriate legal agreements in place. We conform to ISO 13485, a quality management system harmonised with the Medical Design Directive, which means that we can ensure our legal responsibilities, awareness and compliance, and that products that we develop under this accredited regulatory framework mean that when we're able to hold UKCA marks, but also that it's really key developing medical devices which need to meet those regulatory requirements. Our project management team is very much the glue that helps kind of develop the innovations through, and they're great communication right through the process, from the early stage of development, design development, prototyping, validating data, and providing the important evidence base to prove the concept. And ultimately that's going to lead to creating a return on investment. And commercialisation is our end goal. It's important to remember that this can help generate revenue for both the innovator and the health board they work for, and this ultimately helps NHS Scotland to reinvest in future innovations while realising the improvement of having new product services that actually make a difference to patient care and NHS workflow. So InnoScot Health, as I say, funds those ideas very much at the early stage, and we work with other agencies such as Scottish Enterprise and Innovate UK, obviously, to apply for funding at that national level where it's necessary to build the investable or licensable package, if you like. And we're going to hear a bit more about what those options are shortly. Before I pass on, I'm going to just give you a few examples of what do we mean by that early stage funding. So there's early design and development costs, and product development costs will vary significant between different ideas. So Rhino Pinch, you can see the small picture there for staunching nosebleeds. It's a much simpler product than, say, the patient transfer scales, which is a complex technical medical device and it incorporates precise electronic weighing mechanism within it. So, it really depends on also the stage of the innovation will come to us, what sort of costs or how we're able to fund those sorts of development costs. Co-development with a manufacturer enables us to share the risk, and it's a good way to accelerate a product to market cost effectively, where you're working with a industry partner manufacturer who's already working in that market. And we've worked with Open House to develop the structured critical airway management scram bags and the whole range of those with the innovator Paul Swinton. And Scram is also an example where some of our funding might go towards trademark registrations, or in other cases, other patenting or other intellectual property costs. And our ability to bring innovations to market in investor-ready form is of significant value, and we've got over 20 years experience doing that and being involved in spin-outs or actually forming them, working with others to build that investable proposition, or in some cases we're just we've got that special unique position where we're able to hold equity on behalf of NHS Health Board. So we've got a very particular position between our relationship between the NHS and the healthcare investment community, and so the first one that we were, or 20 years ago now, was Touch EMAS, as it was called, I think then, was a spin out from NHS Lothian, which is now owned, fully run by Azure, but they still have their base in Livingston. So we're constantly reviewing the funding landscape, trying to identify wider funding opportunities to maximise our limited funds, stretch them as far as we can, and especially where there's projects where there's significant investments required to show that proof of concept, proof of principle. So in some cases we have pulled together a consortium to, access or bid for specific funds, and so we've now gathering sort of a bit of our intelligence, if you like, from on our website now. That's live, and so it's worth noting that some of that, the things that you might find there could be more the funding for, say, innovation fellowships or personal development type programs, which is more about supporting the individual rather than the actually supporting the having a cost for funding for actual project costs. I just thought it's worth mentioning there, it includes a whole range of different funding opportunities. Some are maybe more local, like Scottish Interface administers Scottish Funding Council's innovation vouchers, which can support a new collaboration with academic partner for small businesses. Also, there are a whole range of open innovation challenges through small business research initiatives, some of those in different, and they're not always on the same platform. so you can find out more about those. And I certainly recommend, whether if you're an NHS member of staff interested in getting in more innovation projects, also being in touch with your test bed to actually get involved in from the NHS side, as well as being, potentially hard for companies to apply. So that was a bit of a quick, brief introduction. And I'm delighted to be joined by Terry O'Neill, who's the head of the health team within Knowledge Transfer Network. Brings a lot of experience from working in the medical sector with it. And it's worth remembering that medical technologies, or MedTech, and digital technologies are key priorities and priorities in that health for wealth environment, and also for the team within KTN. So let me bring up Terry's slides. Over to you, Terry.
Well, that's great. Thanks, Fiona. And ironically, despite the fact I'm head of health at Innovate UK KTN, I'm not feeling very healthy today. I've got this terrible cold that's going around, so I'll apologise in advance if I'm coughing all the time, but hopefully we'll get through it without too much of that. Thanks for inviting me to speak today. And this is really around the funding ecosystem across the UK. And hopefully I'll give you some tips and tricks and some things that you hadn't known about already. I'll also show you some resources that you can potentially have a look at and take away with you. They're all really designed to funnel people into picking the phone up to have a conversation, because I think everything starts with a conversation. And certainly I'll make the offer 2 or 3 times during this presentation that we're open for business. If you want to pick the phone up and have a chat for half an hour or hop on a Zoom call, that's absolutely no problem. And my contact details will be on at the end of this presentation. Can I have the next slide, Fiona? Seems to be bouncing around a little bit. That's not me. There you go. So who is Innovate UK KTN? So we've changed our name recently. We were the Knowledge Transfer Network, then we went to the abbreviation KTN, and now we're getting ever closer to Innovate UK KTN. So we work very closely with Innovate UK. Most of our funding comes from Innovate UK, and we're really there to connect innovators with new partners. In a nutshell, if I was to put it in 2 sentences, we try to understand business needs, especially from SMEs, and we try to help businesses navigate the innovation ecosystem in the UK, which, as you all know, is complicated and constantly changing. So there may be a funding call open today, and in 3 weeks' time it might be gone, and that's the end of it. So we try to navigate companies through that, and we do that using lots of different mechanisms. But as I said earlier on, most of what we do starts with a conversation. So again, I'll encourage people to please start those conversations. Next slide, please, Fiona. There's a lot of information in here, and I've only got 10 minutes. So what I've done is I've really highlighted in green there the sort of top line things that we do, but we do a lot more. And again, I can tell you a lot more offline. But basically what we do is we connect, we provide funding advice, we try to influence government. And as you're all aware, that's a really difficult thing to do. We try to do that. We support individual applications often to funding calls, and we navigate people, as I've said, organisations through the innovation support landscape. We can't do everything. It's often a case of referring people onto other organisations who are best placed to advise. But in green there, oh, what's happened? In green there, in terms of connecting, we can potentially find useful partners for an application into a grant, for example. In terms of funding advice, a lot of it's awareness, not only awareness of what's open now, but what's coming along in 6 months' time, 10 months' time, 18 months' time. So we have potentially our finger on the pulse of that. Influencing, as I've said, we try to promote industry needs. We do that often through trade associations, ABHI, ABPI, BIA, and the rest. High-level application reviews. We'll actually look at an application before submission, especially a very late-stage application draft, and we'll provide tips and tricks individually to organisations to try and improve their chances of being funded. And then, as I say, navigation, the innovation ecosystem, complicated and constantly changing. So if we can help to navigate through that, all the better. Next slide, please, Fiona. There you go. So we're about 280 people now. The majority of our sort of business-facing people have come from industry. So personally, I was an immunologist for years, developed vaccines, worked in biotech, went into that business planning, venture capital fundraising, startup world, and I've been doing this now for about 8 years under these conditions. This is a graphic really that highlights that we have people in all these different industry sectors. And whereas it's very easy sometimes between health and agri-food or health and medical biotech or something like that to work together, we're encouraging more and more these days to work right across those industry sectors. So, for example, what's happening in digital in the creative industries or the digital economy or design, we're encouraged really to bring that expertise into the health sector to try and benefit everybody. We have some overarching activities around sustainability and net zero, some international activities, and then access to finance is a big thing and a growing thing for us these days. Next slide, please, Fiona. These are our priority areas, and really the priority areas are listed in order not to exclude anybody, because the last thing we want to do is say, well, we can't talk to you because you're not quite medicines or you're not quite digital health. So on the left there, you'll see our priority areas: medicines, medtech, digital health and care, sustainable healthcare, and a regional element. And really, in terms of working specifically with Innovate UK, we have activities in all of the areas on the right there. So there's a health and life sciences sector team in Innovate UK. We work really closely with them. There's a healthy aging team transforming medicines manufacturing, our future health, and then digital to early diagnosis and precision medicine. The eagle-eyed amongst you will know that those last 4 bullets are the old Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund themes, which endure and carry on. Some of them have actually gone past their ISCF life and have gone into a different world. So we have activities specifically with Innovate UK on all of those areas. Next slide, please, Fiona. We've done an element of mapping. This is something that we've termed our Medimap, and that's on our website. It sort of highlights organisations across the country that can sort of engage in medical devices and medicines. Again, it's not there to enable people to spend 2 or 3 hours poking around. It's really there to for you to have a look and then to pick the phone up to us and say, look, I'm interested in medtech companies in, I don't know, the southeast of Scotland or something like that. And then we can have that conversation and take it further. Next slide, please, Fiona. That's it. So this is something I put together in me evenings and weekends a number of years ago. You'll see that it's a deliberate mistake. There's Horizon 2020. It's now Horizon Europe. But it was my attempt to put everything on one slide. So all of the funding mechanisms that are available to people, to SMEs especially. So at the top, we have private sector funding. Going down, we have European funding. On the left, the research councils. On the right there at the bottom, the National Institute of Health Research activity. But in the middle, highlighted in purple, is all of the Innovate UK mechanisms that they use to support mainly SMEs. And we can talk sensibly offline. We don't have time specifically just now to talk about any of those. So if anybody has any or wants to know more about any of those schemes, and there are others as well. There are a number of others that have come up in the last few weeks, like the investment partnerships and different aspects of the biomedical catalyst as well. So if anybody has any questions about that, either drop them in the Q&A or contact me after this. If we move on to the next slide. So this is on our website, so it's the previous slide made a little bit user-friendly. The resemblance to the London Underground map is purely coincidental, but you can have a look. It's a bit more interactive. The link is there, but again, pick the phone up to us and have more of an in-depth conversation. Next slide, please, Fiona. We have a good applications guide. Normally, this talk we can run to half a day or even a day on how to put together a good application especially for grants. But if you want to have a look at what a good application looks like, then please use our good application guide on there. The link is in the presentation. We have. Thanks, Fiona. If you can move on. We have a range of newsletters. We have a general health newsletter. We have one in medicines manufacturing, and we have a newsletter in healthy aging these days. Healthy aging is a big thing for us, and involves lots of different industry sectors coming together. So please have a look at our newsletters. Again, if you want to know more, contact me on LinkedIn or pick the phone up. Next slide, please, Fiona. And as I say, we can spin this presentation out for half a day or even a day on what it takes to put a good grant application together. And I always sort of presage this with the fact that it's sometimes quite patronizing to say, you need to answer the question on these grant applications, but actually that's probably the best advice that anybody could give you, because you wouldn't believe the number of applications that come our way that don't actually answer the questions. It's obvious that if you're going for a grant application, you need high scores in all questions, but that tell a story, have a golden thread, be consistent and cohesive, and avoid red flags. That's really, in a nutshell, what we advise. Again, there's a lot of information underneath this slide that we can talk about offline or on another day. But that's the basis really of the best advice that we can give, especially on grants. Just answer the questions. You use the resources available, and hopefully you get high scores and you'll be funded. That's pretty much it, Fiona. My contact details are there. Phone number. If you can't take a screenshot of that, then I'm on LinkedIn. Just find me on LinkedIn, connect, and I'll give you me contact details. We can have a chat, and then we can see where things go. So please put your questions in the Q&A, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Terry. Next, we've got Ian Murray, and I'm just to stop sharing so he allows him to start sharing. Who Ian's program manager, High Company Growth Creation team, in the Entrepreneurship and Investment Directorate. So over to you, Ian.
Thank you. Okay, I hope everyone can see those slides okay. Yes, Fiona said, I'm from Scottish Enterprise, and I'm going to concentrate this afternoon on one of our programmes, which is called the High Growth Spinout Programme, and I'll cover the support that it provides, and then briefly touch on some examples of projects that we've supported in the past and some of the other support that's available from SE. So the programme itself supports research from Scotland's universities, research institutes and NHS boards, and it has the objective of creating new spin-out companies that are based in Scotland and have the potential to generate economic impact in Scotland. And by that we mean, for the purposes of this programme, we're looking for opportunities where the companies created have the potential to achieve at least £5 million of turnover per annum, or secure at least £10 million of private investment within 8 years of beginning to trade. So the programme itself has 3 phases of financial support. 2 of those are in the form of grants, and they go to the host institution, and the third is in the form of a convertible loan, and that goes directly to the spin-out company. And I'll touch on each of these a bit more in turn in the next few slides. It's also worth mentioning that we do like to work closely with those who are thinking of applying. So we're always happy to meet to discuss potential projects and their suitability for HGSP, and then to comment on applications prior to them being submitted. So starting with opportunity qualification, and this is typically for projects which are early in the commercialisation journey, so probably 2 or 3 years from being able to spin out. And we provide at this stage grant funding of £75,000, and that's to help address gaps in the spin out business case and provide some validation of the commercial potential. The support is provided via a series of discrete elements or tools, as we call them, and you can see those listed on the slide here. The combination of tools that a project needs will vary project to project, and there's no minimum or maximum number of tools that can be applied for, and there's no minimum or maximum budget that's set aside for each tool, albeit that the total must stay within that £75,000 ceiling. For opportunity qualification, we accept applications all year round. What we do is we set a deadline for submission each month, and then we review and make a decision on the applications the following month. At the end of this stage of support, there is an expectation that most projects will be in a good position to apply for the next phase of our support, which is called company creation. And so company creation, as the name suggests, is really about advancing the project to the point of spin out. And typical activities that are covered here will be developing the technology to a value inflection point that will have been identified earlier, probably during the opportunity qualification phase through discussions with customers and investors. It's about building out the team necessary to secure investment and spin out. It's about getting your investor-ready business plan in shape. It's about engaging with investors and potentially also negotiating shareholder and license agreements with your host institution. The review process for this stage is a bit different from opportunity qualification. So here we have competitive calls and we have deadlines 3 times a year, which are currently in February, June and October. And following submission, there is a presentation to our external review panel. So in an ideal world, at the end of the company creation phase, the project team will be in a position to spin out and have secured investment. However, that's not always possible, and it's actually getting harder and harder for early stage businesses to raise investment. So we have a third element of support that we call investment completion. And this support is in the form of a convertible loan of up to £400,000, which goes directly to the spin out company. And that's to bridge the gap between the company spinning out and investment being secured. It's there really to help maintain the momentum that's been built up via the grant supported phases, and should enable recruitment and retention of key management positions that are required to secure investment, as well as allowing the team to continue developing its technology and engage with customers. So I thought also it might be worth just giving some examples of projects that we've supported in the past that are now spin-outs. And there's a few that are listed on this slide here. And I think the main point I want to make here is that SE support doesn't stop at spin out. So if I take Causeway Therapeutics here as an example, that project had almost 3 years worth of support from SE prior to spinning out. And then since spinning out, SE has participated in 3 investment rounds, including the company's latest round, which was earlier this year. And we've provided innovation grant funding and a range of other support to the companies to meet its growth ambitions. And that would be the expectation for most, if not all, of the spin-outs coming out of the programme. And then just finishing up on HGSP itself, it's probably worthwhile just giving an indication of what our current portfolio is like. So as you can see from that, there are over 30 live projects, and half of those are in the sort of life/health sciences space. And I've listed there a few of our current projects, just to give a flavour of the types of opportunities we're looking at. And I just wanted to highlight retinal imaging there on the bottom left as an example of a project which has had those two phases of support from SE, and is now hopefully actually within the next few days is about to spin out from Edinburgh University as a company called Eye to the Future. And then just lastly on this, I've sort of talked about the kind of core elements of support and funding through the programme, but we do also run some entrepreneurial training courses as well, usually a couple of times a year, and that's for those who are part of the programme already or in the process of applying for funding. And then finally on this one, we do also from time to time, basically the programme is sector agnostic. We look at applications, it's about the opportunity rather than where it's coming from, but we do occasionally run focus calls in certain areas. And so, for example, last year in conjunction with our colleagues in SE and our Health for Wealth National Programme team, we ran a call focused on digital health and data, and all being well, we're going to look to try and repeat that again later this year. So I'm almost finished now. So I was asked just to highlight some of the other support that's available from SE, and this is by no means all of it, but I've tried to cover some of the key bits of support, and particularly some of the bits that some of our HGSP spinouts would access. So, for example, most of our projects we work with will get some IP support. They'll make use of market research support from our research services team, and they'll look at R&D support and investment support. And I'll just touch very briefly on those last two because they may be of more general interest. So our main form of company R&D support is SMART. It's open to all companies in Scotland and provides grant funding of £100,000, which represents up to 70% of eligible project costs. And applications are normally accepted all year round. There is an expectation with SMART that there will be a high degree of technical innovation involved in a project, and that's why most of our HGSP spinouts apply and are well positioned to secure this, since they are commercialising novel technology. And then just finishing up on other support from SE, if you are looking to secure investment, then SE also provides support in this area through our growth investments team, which used to be known as the Scottish Investment Bank. And here we have specialists who can support companies to source funding and advise on different investment and financing options. And we also have our own investment funds, and will co-invest alongside other investors subject to certain conditions being met. And SE will typically invest amounts from 100,000 up to 2 million in these deals. And finally, I thought it'd be worth just including some links to other information on business support that's available, not just from SE, but also from other Scottish public sector agencies and local authorities as well. And that's me. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ian. So I think we now move into kind of Q&A. It's not very long. but we've had a few questions. So
Fiona, sorry, before you start, do you want me to
So-
stop sharing?
if you could stop sharing,
Yeah.
that would be great. It looked like you had.
Yeah.
I think we maybe, I don't think we need a slide really for this point. I'm confused by the view. This is too little view. I think I need to invest in a webcam so that I can actually have a big screen with lots of things on it all at once. I mean, Marianne was kind of monitoring chat in the Q&A.
Yeah, we've got some questions that have came through. So Terry, one particularly for you was, you mentioned avoiding red flags within applications. Could you give an example of what these red flags could be?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. I mean, so it very much depends on what type of grant funding you're going for as to the thematic focus of that particular grant. So there are some very wide grants out there, like the the UK version of SMART, which is very wide thematically, going down in sort of decreasing levels of wideness, if you like, into the biomedical catalyst, which is more focused on biomedical, medicines, medtech, digital health, that sort of thing, right down to very, very specific grant application calls. The first red flag really is one of scope. So if you're slightly trying to shoehorn your project into one of these grant calls, and you think you may be just on the edge of the scope, you probably are. So I think the first piece of advice really is make sure you're in scope. Secondly, if you have partners, if it's a collaborative opportunity, make sure the partners are eligible to go in. They're all very, very simple things. Most Innovate UK funding is commercially focused. You have a very a small word count of usually 400 or 600 words, but overly technical, difficult languages, acronyms that aren't explained, that sort of thing just really puts the assessors off, as does a poorly articulated offer, an unclear innovation. So it's all about clarity, it's all about scope, and eligibility really for me. So they're the main red flags.
Great, thanks for clarifying. I think there's one more question for you that came in, and that was, has the UK government signed back up to Horizon?
Yeah, I saw
And
that. I was trying to ignore it, to be honest with you. No, I wasn't. So they I mean, I believe they're on track to do so, if indeed they haven't done so already. The sort of things that are coming out of government with the new ministers coming into the sort of science portfolio are that signing up to Horizon Europe needs to provide value for money for the taxpayer, whatever that means. That's a very difficult thing to sort of interpret. But certainly the national contact point for health, the people that are working on Horizon Europe in our organisation are putting workshops together to guide people through what the health aspects of Horizon Europe look like. So it feels to me very much like we're on track to be signed up to that, if indeed we haven't already been done so.
great, thank you. Ian, a question I actually had was the toolkit you mentioned for the opportunity qualification. Are these services that Scottish Enterprise provide?
Not directly, no. So those will be the expectation. Those will be things that the applicant will fund, and we'll provide the funding for that. So it will be mostly subcontracted services. So if they need a very specific detailed market report, or they need to travel as part of that to do that market research, it would cover that. Quite a lot of in this of medtech space, for example, might need to look at the regulatory landscape. So it would cover the cost of bringing in a consultant to advise on what that journey through it would be. So it's mostly, basically whoever was applying would say these are the gaps, these are the sort of things we need to get support for. we would provide that funding, and then it would be up to the applicant themselves to actually source that service, but it would be under those categories of support.
Okay, great, thanks for that. I think one of the last questions that came in, I guess it says, is your support targeted at spin-outs or perhaps for companies with headquarters in Scotland? I guess that the Scotland wouldn't be for KTN, that's UK-wide, but for InnoScot and SE, I'm assuming is Scotland only, but what about InnoScot, Fiona?
So as long as an organisation is working in a project, we support projects where it involves NHS Scotland health boards. And so we can give a more of advisory like support to help with that, understanding what the landscape looks like. But we are based in working closely with NHS Scotland. So much as I've got a general awareness of how things work in England, that's certainly not the expert, and I think it varies depending on where you are and what you're trying to do. So it's much more complex. So we would tend to focus on working with organisations with an interest in working with NHS Scotland. Sorts of things that we don't do is we're not helping you kind of into the procurement pathway. So it's where there could be some intellectual property generated potentially in a collaborative project, or where there's an NHS partner that's involved. I think the thing about whether you have a UK base or a Scottish base, so can be one of the factors in terms of how you can tap into different types of government funding. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
Marianne, maybe I can sort of add to that. I think it's an interesting question. Do we focus on spin-outs? Well, we don't. It's true to say that most applications into Innovate UK need to be SMEs, but SMEs can be actually quite large. They can be up to 250 people, quite large organisations. I think for us, it's all about that conversation. It could be an academic, it could be a clinician in Scotland wanting to look at the innovation ecosystem. And it's really guidance through that ecosystem for whoever wants to open up that conversation, really. It's true to say that we don't focus necessarily on academics or clinicians specifically, but we're happy to have those conversations initially if we can help.
Great, thank you. And I think we've got time maybe for one last question that's just came in. And the question is your main focus on supporting new innovation from existing NHS staff predominantly, or do you also support external partners to bring innovation in? I guess that one might be for InnoScot.
Yeah, I think we were set up to support that development of intellectual property generated by NHS staff. The reality is that a lot of that's much more collaborative. But so we may not fund an SME, but we can help with more advisory support, I think. But if an SME is looking for an NHS partner, and then there's some sort of collaboration, that's when we can certainly see if there are ways that we might support that. In terms of that, understanding where to go to do a feasibility trial, or to you're gathering the data that you need in order to become to get your regulatory approvals and things like that. So it's certainly worth having a conversation with us to see if it's whether we can help, or if we can suggest somebody else who might be better placed than we are. And I think that's kind of us. Time to round up. Really conscious, so slightly running over our aim of a 45-minute, very short lunchtime session. Just a couple of things to kind of conclude with. Is that we are is that as Terry certainly said earlier, this is just really about sort of giving you a bit of a flavour and a taster, and it's very much hope it's sparked some ideas, and we want to follow on that conversation. Obviously we can share contact details for Ian and Terry if you didn't manage to catch them. We'll be sharing slides afterwards as well, along with feedback survey. So do give us feedback about what, if there's other things you'd like to hear from. But for us, you can, if you're an NHS person, you can book a consultation, or you can fill out our, put notes of, I've got an idea, I'd like to talk to somebody about it if there aren't time slots available. But that's to talk with our with one of the Innovation Manager team. So we've got a wide range of experience to have that sort of initial conversation and talk things through. Look out for our innovation calls, and our next webinar, in fact, is going to be the launch of our next one. And hold these dates in the diary, and there'll be more. Once we've got they're a bit more formulated, you can sign up to those. And as I say, do give us feedback if you'd like to hear more, or learn about a particular topic, or have a discussion about a particular area. We'd be happy to talk to you about that and see how we can do that. So I think that's only just a few minutes over the 45 minutes. So thanks very much for joining us. And as I say, look forward to seeing it one of the future webinars, or following up with you. Do get in touch. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks. Bye.